So thank you so much everyone for attending the second Disability Sport Network webinar. The first one we held last month was around collaboration and also talking around COVID-19 and how people are coping and feeling and what they are doing in the given time. So it's really great to see so many people back at this second webinar, which will be specifically looking at children and young people insight and also education best practice. So as I've said, if you can keep your microphones and cameras off just during the presentations, it just helps with kind of the technology, but please do turn them on if you wish to ask a question or when you're in your breakout groups. Hopefully you all received the agenda and presentation this morning with some instructions around how to get into the breakout rooms if you wish to continue your discussions after the presentation. But I will run through those again at the end of the presentations for people. So hopefully technology working, it should all work out. So as I said, it's great to have so many of you here. I would like to now pass over to my colleague Nick Shalell, who will give a bit more context around the agenda and then present the presenters. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Gemma. Hi everyone, my name is Nick Shalell. I'm the PE and School Sports Officer for Active Sussex. My role is to support primary schools with the PE Sport Premium and helping them develop their PE, school sport and physical activity provision. So yeah, really looking forward to the webinar today. We've got a good mix involved in the call of schools and partners working with schools. So hopefully we'll be able to share some really good insight around participation from pupils with disabilities and also some good practice. Jem, could you move on to the agenda slide for me? Oh, there we go. So as it says there, in a moment I'm going to hand over to Nicola File from Activity Alliance, who's going to deliver her presentation on the My Active Future report. And then following that, we're going to get two examples of good practice of what delivery looks like within an education setting. And we've got a special school example and also a mainstream school example. Once we finish those presentations, there will be the opportunity for continued conversations in the breakout rooms. And just looking through the slides, if we can just make sure our mics and cameras are turned off. If you do have a question that you want to ask during a presentation, if you could use the text box, you may have a chance at the end of each presentation to ask one question, but ideally we want you to go and use those breakout rooms. As Gemma mentioned, this will be recorded, so you will be able to rewatch this at your leisure and share it with other colleagues or other staff members at your school, should you need to. We designated an hour for the webinar, but it may run over slightly, especially if you do want to go and utilise those breakout rooms. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Nicola. So Nicola,
hello.
Would you like to share your screen?
Yeah, I can do that.
And I'll hand over to you.
Brilliant. So, brilliant. Everyone okay with that? Everyone can see the screen happy? Let me know if it all changes at any point. Hello, I'll do a quick introduction for those of you who don't know me. Sorry if you do. My name's Nicola. I work for Activity Alliance as the engagement advisor for the East and South East regions, working with organisations such as yourselves, such as the guys at Active Sussex, to try and make active lives possible for people with disabilities across the whole kind of range of disabilities that we cover. We've recently done a piece of research specifically looking at children and young people. It's not something that we've done before. Historically, as an organisation, we're very much focused on adults. So this is a new piece of research for us. So fingers crossed this works. It's looking good so far. So we know that there are 1 million disabled children in England, and additionally there's then children with special educational needs as well. This piece of work is made to sit alongside of Sport England's Active Lives research, That is the main overall measure of how active disabled children are. And I know that there are limitations in that that only goes out to children in mainstream schools. But as we know that the majority of children with disabilities are in mainstream schools, it is still a useful piece of research for us to use. It shows that for several age groups, disabled children are less active than their non-disabled peers. And it also kind of reiterates the benefits of sport and physical activity for children's physical, mental, social and emotional development. I don't need to tell you guys that, I don't think. I'm hoping that you're flying the flag for that one. But we do know that sport and physical activity is linked to cognitive benefits, learning ability and better grade attainment for disabled children as well as their non-disabled peers. So our bit of research that we've done, as I said, it's designed to sit alongside Sport England's Active Lives Children and Young People survey, and it investigates the differences in experience and perceptions of sport and physical activity amongst disabled and non-disabled children. So really comparing the two different peer groups and seeing how their attitudes, enjoyment and participation, as well as barriers and motivations differ. So how we did it, we heard directly from children aged between 5 and 16 years. A lot of the research that's been done doesn't actually directly speak to children, but instead speaks to parents, carers, deliverers. And while it's important to hear from parents as well as children, we wanted to make sure we had a balance on that. We also spoke to organisations who work both in sport and more generally with children. We did that via a workshop as well as throughout the rest of the project. We did a lot of qualitative data collection, so actually asking children to expand and explain their thoughts rather than just giving them kind of a tick box answer. We gave them the opportunity to explain in their own words. And we used a panel as well as sharing amongst our normal networks. We got 760 disabled children and their parents to take part, with a similar sample size for non-disabled children. And the issue that we did come across was the difficulty of defining disability, especially with young children and those with complex needs. So primarily we asked parents to identify if their child was disabled, and then further down the line we asked children themselves of a child-friendly version of that question to assess their kind of alignment and perception of it. Kind of typically the kind of biggest range, the biggest sample of impairment we got was from social and behavioural difficulties, then learning and understanding, breathing or stamina was very high, mental health, speech, mobility, and I'm not going to go into kind of all of the detail for this because we could be here for hours if we kind of break it down each impairment for each section. But if there is any particular impairment types or kind of anything else that you want broken down in more detail than I can go into in the next half an hour, please let me know and we can go through it at the end, or all of the research is available on our website, so you can have a look through it at your own pace if that is preferred. So we also had a good mix of age of children, so it's about 50-50 between secondary and primary age. Gender was a little less well balanced, so 61% male to 39% female, and then household, so social economic status was about half and half as well. Ethnicity, we asked the parent their ethnicity, and it was 89% white, so that's fairly representative of the population. So why we're all here, the key findings. There we go, bit of suspense. Our key finding gives a similar figure to what Sport England's Active Lives report does. Focusing on term time activity, disabled children are significantly more likely to be less active compared to non-disabled children. So a third of disabled children are taking part in 30 minutes or less of physical activity a day. Disabled children's activity levels decrease significantly as they get older. Activity levels for disabled and non-disabled children are similar when they first start school, but by age 11, disabled children are less likely to be active or fairly active. The gap widens more significantly by the time you're 16. So children with mobility impairments are the least active group, with 46% being active for less than 30 minutes a day, so that's nearly half. Those with long-term pain and visual impairments are also less likely to be active, with around 40% for both of them respectively taking part in less than 30 minutes of activity a day. Children with hearing, speech and breathing impairments are more active than children with other impairments. For this, the same as Sport England's Active Lives, we used their kind of definitions of activity levels. So less active is less than 30 minutes a day, fairly active is 30 to 60 minutes a day, and then active is at least 60 minutes a day. If there's any questions, I can't see the chat the way that this is going, so it might be worth doing that at the end, unless Nick and Gemma, unless there's anything urgent. I don't know if you guys can pick it up and stop me. So
yeah, I'm
cool.
keeping an eye on the chat, and there isn't anything.
Awesome. Great. Brilliant. So enjoyment about sport and physical activity. So almost 3/4 of disabled children say that they enjoy sport and being active a lot or quite a bit, and that's significantly less than non-disabled children, so 71% compared to 82%. Enjoyment, it decreases with age, so disabled children in key stages 1 and 2 are significantly more likely to enjoy sport and being active compared to those in key stages 3 and 4. Non-disabled children in key stage 1, 2 and 3 show similar levels of enjoyment, and this decreases significantly at key stage 4. So that suggests that while all children enjoy being active less as they get older, it happens earlier in childhood for disabled children. Activity levels are associated with enjoyment, so disabled children who are more active are significantly more likely to say they enjoy sports and being active. For the least active children, this falls again, so it highlights the association between enjoyment and activity levels, especially for those who are less active. Next up, we're doing about participation in school. So only 1 in 4 take part all of the time at school. Many children told us their experiences of being unable to join in with certain activities and games, or being left out of PE classes altogether. And again, this increases with age. As I said, we got that qualitative data from them about how they're left out, and the most popular, that's not the right way to put it, the most frequent ones were either by sitting on the side and watching activities for all or part of lessons, doing their homework in a separate classroom while the class participates in PE, being sent to the library or another part of the school, schools scheduling physio during PE time, schools not considering or acquiring suitable equipment, and then schools having the equipment but not necessarily having the time or support staff to use them. And then the reasons for not liking PE, the children told us that it's because other children staring, laughing or teasing, feeling like the teachers don't understand, a lack of suitable equipment or uncomfortable environment, being left out by teachers or friends, frequent changes in activity or lesson structures can be unpredictable or overwhelming, struggling to understand instructions, and I mean I could go on for a while, but there's as I say, the full report will give you a whole list of different ones to consider. Then we're going to have a look at participation outside of school. So compared to non-disabled peers, disabled children were significantly less likely to have been active in many settings in the last year. The difference is wider for more formal activities like playing for a sports team, attending sports classes or after school clubs. There are also significant differences between disabled and non-disabled children being active in informal settings like parks, play areas, leisure centres, swimming pools and then friends' houses. Those who are active in these settings also enjoy them less than non-disabled children. So for all settings, disabled children enjoyed it less. But despite this, disabled children want to take part in these settings at similar levels to non-disabled children. So the want is still there. It's probably that enjoyment level that means that it's not happening. So as I said, the qualitative data is what's really interesting in this report. So children were asked if they wanted to do more in each different setting. Both groups were more likely to say they wanted to go to a park or play area more, go to a leisure centre or swimming pool more, play at home or play at a friend's house. So that really does reflect that it's that informal activity that children enjoy more, whether they have a disability or not. There was less interest in the more formal activities for all children, including playing for a sports team and going to after school clubs. And that playing for a sports team was the only activity that disabled children were significantly less interested in compared to non-disabled children, suggesting that sports teams are one of the least appealing settings for disabled children, whether that's because of a negative past experience or whatever it might be. It's something to really consider, and we're going to come on to that in the next few slides. So as children grow older, they become less likely to say they would like to do more in all settings, though going to a leisure centre or swimming pool showed the smallest decrease in interest. So that suggests that simply offering different activities may not be enough to engage with older children who have already lost interest. So inclusive activity, kind of in the name of what I do, and children are more likely to want to take part in inclusive activities with disabled and non-disabled children. That's inclusive, that's what I like. So 44% showed a preference for inclusive sport and activities. However, 1/5 say they prefer to take part with children who share similar impairments. So it supports the delivery of inclusive activity. However, it also reminds us that children and parents, especially those who may have had a negative or bad experience, can feel that disability-specific activities are more likely to offer their child an accessible or positive experience moving forward. Many of those who prefer disability-specific or pan-disability sport have had negative experiences with what they view as inclusive activities with non-disabled children. These were poor experiences as the activities were not adapted, the deliverers or teachers did not provide any specific support, or they did not feel comfortable with non-disabled children. Children with visual, mobility and long-term pain impairments are most likely to prefer to take part with children that have similar impairments, though inclusive activity was the most common choice regardless of impairment type. And children who are less active are more likely to prefer to take part with children with similar impairments compared to those who are active. So motivations. Parents, how we collected this was we asked parents to ask their child what their top 3 reasons for taking part in sport and physical activity were. And although disabled children participate and enjoy physical activity less than non-disabled children, they share the same top 3 reasons for taking part, sorry. And these were having fun, improving physical health and making friends, although they're in a slightly different order. So among disabled children, the top 3 motivations are similar across all impairment types and demographics, with a couple of key differences. So the first one is that having fun is more important for those with social or behavioural impairments and for those with a learning impairment. Among disabled children, having fun is a less important motivation as children get older. A similar trend was seen in non-disabled children, though the decrease was less marked. And disabled children with parents from the lower socioeconomic groups are more likely to select having fun as a top motivation than those in the higher socioeconomic groups. It's a hard word to say. And finally, that less active children are less motivated by having fun. So we're going to have a look at kind of motivations as a whole. There's a lot of information on this slide. I do appreciate that, but the key points to pick out are the significantly different ones. So that's the ones with the arrows next to it. So while the top 3 motivations, as we said, are the same for both disabled and non-disabled. Someone muted me, sorry.
Yeah.
While the top 3 motivations are the same for disabled and non-disabled children, disabled children are significantly more likely to report other factors as being important too. They are less commonly chosen, but they potentially demonstrate a specific appeal for activity and sport among disabled children. And these reasons are all related to psychological drivers and their perceptions about the environment. So the 3 we're going to look at are the 3 that have been boxed in the box there. We're going to look at a sense of belonging. So achieving a sense of belonging was an important reason to be active for disabled children compared to their non-disabled peers. It was explored further in the qualitative research, as I said. So what they told us was that what is important to them is meeting new people and making new friends, helping and being helped by their friends, feeling proud and having a role within a team, succeeding as part of the team, shared interests and social activities, meeting other children like them who have similar challenges and receiving positive encouragement. Then looking at the importance of independence, it's a really important reason for a child to be active. Some children recognise that they often need to rely on adults or their peers to do everyday activities, or that they miss activities and experiences because of needing someone to assist them. So taking part in a sport activity on their own by themselves helps them to have more control and autonomy in their lives. And then talking about helping with their impairment, disabled children were shown a separate and additional reason to select in the survey than non-disabled children. That was about helping with their impairment, health condition or disability. And it was chosen by 1 in 5 disabled children as one of their top 3 motivations. So disabled children with chronic health conditions were the most likely to select that option as well, showing that children and their parents recognise the benefits of sport and physical activity and those benefits on their health as well as managing their impairment. But it does also reflect that some children and parents see disability as a personal obstacle to overcome rather than a barrier presented by society and the environment. So there's a whole host of information on motivations in the report, and as I say, we could be here for a very long time, so I would recommend you having a look at that section, or make sure that the link to where you can see the report is sent out in the meeting notes as well. So barriers to being active. Non-disabled children's top barriers were wanting to do other things, costing too much money, and transport worries. But for disabled children, the psychological factors, like how they feel about their impairment and not feeling comfortable, become more important than the practical considerations. So 2/5 of disabled children think their impairment, health condition, illness or disability stops them from being active, which reflects how many people can perceive impairments or differences as a central barrier to their activities. Some of the respondents consider their impairment in the context of the medical model of disability rather than the social model. So many children, even at an early age, view their impairment as the top barrier rather than the societal barriers. This actually follows our annual survey results. So our annual survey, which we covered in the previous meeting a couple of weeks ago, focuses on adults and perceptions of disability in sport and physical activity, and this really does mirror that. So yeah, do have a look at those, and this is particularly true for long-term pain and those with multiple impairments. Next up we have so the full list of barriers, and again I'm not going to go through them all, but the one to really point out here is the bottom one of no barriers, where there is a significant difference between the answer for disabled children and non-disabled children. And you can clearly see that the amount, well, the barrier of not having any barriers, that isn't a barrier, for non-disabled children is a lot higher. So we're going to look at the feeling uncomfortable barrier in a little bit more detail. And again, we've then broken that down into 3 sections as dictated to us really by the survey respondents. So the first thing we're going to look at is the concern of getting hurt. So disabled children were significantly more likely to view getting hurt as a barrier compared to non-disabled children. During the qualitative research again, we asked children to expand on their concerns on this, and they told us it's because of facilities or equipment not being adapted to suit them, and that's particularly true for the faster paced sports. That children notice their parents' safety concerns and become worried themselves. Some are less worried but don't want to upset their parents by doing perceived risky activities. Some worry that the length or intensity of a particular session could be too intense. They want to try the activity but they're worried about getting tired or injured. And then parents and children rarely received advice or reassurance about being safe when being active. So some feel it's safer just to avoid taking part altogether. Then we're going to look at the worried at how I look section. So again, disabled children are significantly more likely to worry about how they look when being physically active and taking part in sport. And the research told us that this was because they're worried about standing out from their peers or drawing attention to themselves because of past negative experiences of bullying and teasing, worries of their physical appearance even sometimes related to maybe a visible impairment, but often to just their general appearance, and to be seen to have failed or have made mistakes, but less commonly then about self-doubt and low self-esteem. Then the third section on this is about being unsure of what to do during an activity. Again, disabled children are significantly more likely to feel that they don't know what they're doing, and that stops them to being active. and this is because of deliverers not explaining or demonstrating activities in a suitable way, deliverers or activities not allowing them enough time to learn or be comfortable, finding it difficult to understand or follow instructions and rules, a lack of experience or skills, again, negative past experiences, which does keep coming up, and not wanting to ask friends or peers what they should be doing. And this we found was significantly more likely to be found for disabled children in Key Stage 4, that they'd be more worried about how they look compared to their non-disabled peers. Then we go on to loneliness, and this is something that whenever we're talking about this research, we're told to emphasise a lot, really, and it's that we found significant differences between disabled and non-disabled children. I mean, you can read it on the screen for yourself. Disabled children are twice as likely as non-disabled children to be sometimes or often lonely. We looked at the individual measures of loneliness, and disabled children are likely to say across all three of them that they are lonely. It wasn't a focus of our qualitative research, but some children did explain the aspects of their lives that caused them to feel lonely, and this was because of not having enough opportunities to socialise with other children, feeling like adults and teachers don't listen to them, having different communication needs, feeling like others do not understand their experience of disability, not knowing what activities or hobbies they can do with others, not knowing who to talk to about their feelings or where to get information, being teased, bullied or judged, socialising with younger children or children with different communication needs, and maybe being put into a different group because maybe their abilities are different, wanting to avoid crowds, loud places or large groups, and having absences in schools or changing schools. So barriers that change with age. So these are changes specifically linked to disabled children and help to explain the decreasing activity levels and enjoyment of activity as children get older. There are several barriers which decline as children reach Key Stage 4, and these trends are seen among both disabled and non-disabled children, so don't appear to be specific to children with impairments. And these include getting hurt, not knowing what to do and not knowing what they would like, and then not knowing what is available, which is for non-disabled children, it becomes less of a barrier with age. So for disabled children, it increases in Key Stage 4. So this suggests that while non-disabled children are more likely to know what they can do and what they like as they get older, for disabled children, uncertainty on what is available persists and then grows. So parents, as I said, we also looked at the role of parents and spoke to parents as well as children about their parents' role in sport and physical activity. Parents and guardians see sport and activity as important and are more involved in decision making for disabled children than non-disabled children. 9 in 10 parents of disabled children say their child's level of physical activity is important to them. Parents of disabled children are more likely to say that decisions on being active are generally or totally driven by them. Parents of disabled children need more support to help their child be active. Over a quarter of parents of disabled children think their child doesn't do enough physical activity, and less than half of parents with a disabled child feel it is easy to get their child involved in physical activity. Parents of disabled children are less likely than parents of non-disabled children to feel they have enough support to manage their child's well-being and to help their child to be active. And again, it's that concern about safety, inclusion and cost that can prevent parents from supporting their child to be active. And all parents find cost and a lack of suitable places a barrier to their children being active for disabled and non-disabled. But additional concerns for parents of disabled children include a lack of support and understanding from people working in the sports sector, and they also worry about their child not being able to take part and their child's safety. Parents of disabled children feel more information on what is suitable, practical support during activities, and advice from medical professionals would help them to support their child to be active. And again, that support and advice from medical professionals is something that has come up in both our adult survey and this survey. So something that is really important, and especially at a time like we're in at the moment, healthcare professionals, social work, the trusted individuals are really, really important to help people be active. So Barriers for parents. Parents of disabled children are more likely to report at least one barrier compared to parents of non-disabled children, and concerns about cost and a lack of suitable places are common and shared barriers for both disabled and non-disabled. Cost is the second most common barrier, though this was less of an issue for parents of disabled children compared to parents of non-disabled children, suggesting that parents of disabled children experience more wide-ranging barriers that they need to consider besides just cost. Both parents of disabled and non-disabled children view a lack of suitable places as a barrier to helping their child be active, suggesting that having accessible and safe local spaces to be active is an issue for all families, and parents of disabled children with mobility impairments are significantly more likely to say a barrier is a lack of suitable places or facilities compared to other impairments. So yeah, the top ones to consider for parents of disabled children are safety and inclusion worries, a lack of support, and attitudes towards being active, which may be related to other circumstances such as financial, giving priority to educational health and other caring responsibilities. Support needs. Parents want free sessions and information and practical support. So we ask parents to choose their top 3 types of support which would most be helpful to them to support their child to be active. Free sessions are chosen as one of the top types of support for both parents of disabled and non-disabled, but less parents of disabled children did select this, as for some other types of support would be more important. But yeah, the practical support, finance, and then yeah, what parents want from their child's activities are the most important ones there. There is a lot of information about the qualitative data that we pulled from this, and if that is something you want to go into, please let me know, but I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to briefly go over that, and then there is more coming up. So what do we know that the children want? That's the kind of key focus of what we're trying to achieve here, is make sure that we get the authentic voice of the child. So in a very simplistic way, there's 5 different things that we want, and I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about them. So the first one would be more understanding and acceptance from others. Many disabled children feel that other children, as well as adults, don't understand their impairment or disabilities in general. So they want others to understand how their impairment affects their lives and how it might affect them being active. This would then help other children be more accepting towards them, and the adults would have more patience. Ways they suggested we could do this was assemblies, training teachers and deliverers, creating campaigns, and TV, apparently. So the next one would be more choice. Children want more variety of different activities that are suitable for them. For some, this just means more inclusive activities, though others want activities that are for children with similar impairments. Some just want the same options that other children have. So in order to have more choice, activities need to be made accessible and truly inclusive. And the ways that were suggested that we could do this would be making adapted equipment more normal, and that was in quotation marks, having age-appropriate adapted versions of all sports and activities so they can choose, deliverers or organisations listening and learning from disabled children and their parents, easy access into buildings and facilities, parents and adults giving them more suggestions, and athlete role models, as well as access to inclusive gyms and play spaces. Then the final 3 suggestions from the children. First one's less pressure. Many children worry about how they look being judged and making mistakes when they're being active. So we want to make sure that they want to be able to make mistakes, and being able to learn at their own pace would help some of them feel more comfortable. Some children, especially those who are less active, wanted more predictable environments. So the suggestions there were comfortable, fun and safe environments, friendly deliverers and peers, which I'm sure all of you deliverers on the call are, being active in smaller groups or quiet spaces, understanding what's required and expected in advance. That level of communication from the beginning is really important. Less focus on being good, again in quotation marks, giving louder instructions and more demonstrations, simplifying language, having more time, more breaks and one-to-one support. Then looking at independence and practical support, many disabled children want to have more support to be active and to feel less reliant on their parents to ensure the activity will go well. Disabled children suggested a number of ways that they could be helped to be more independent. Again, these were being able to choose to do activities with their friends or alone, having appropriate support, introductory sessions with their parents, buddy systems, trusted and known deliverers, trips away with friends, reassurance from parents, better transport options, and being outside more often. And then the last one here is about more motivation. So someone to feel more inspired to be active. It could be from teachers or healthcare professionals or from the media, role models, and the wider representation of disabled people. So friends and peers being active with them and encouraging them to do so. Healthcare professionals doing the same thing. Coverage of parasport events and athletes. Encouraging and acceptance from other children, and just general promotion of healthy living. So the kind of last bit from this is our key recommendations. So there's 4 of them, and it is here to try and make sure that activity gap between disabled and non-disabled children is as small as possible. So there are 4 which should be fairly simple to understand, but it's actually making sure that we do it in the right ways. So number 1 is to engage and listen to all children. Appeal to children's motivations and target disabled children specifically by using motivations like belonging, feeling independent, and helping their impairment. Deliverers and teachers should be supported to really listen to children's needs, not seeing them as a reason for them not to take part. And parents and other adults should give children the choice they want, to give them independence and to help them have the same opportunity as others. Hear children's opinions through research, co-production, and be accessible and inclusive. And it is that co-production, collaboration work that will be really important to ensure that children feel listened to. Number 2 is build confidence and independence from a young age. So all of the research suggests that, you know, drop off is even as you get older is more. So start from a young age. Support children understand disability and celebrate awareness and each other's needs from a young age, which should help to reduce bullying and social isolation. Challenge perceptions of impairments, create opportunities to address personal feelings about being active to help build confidence from a young age, and then re-engage older disabled children to be more active from Key Stage 3 onwards, helping them to create active futures. The third one is to engage leaders on the need for inclusion and show how to create comfortable environments. So more training for teachers and deliverers on disability awareness and inclusive activities, provide comfortable and predictable environments to improve confidence, and policymakers and governments need to address their wider determinants like transport, housing, community health and social care, which is something that I think, due to the current situation and with disabled people, many of them having to be shielded, is being looked at in some situations, but there is still a very long way to go, and it could be going either way really with that at the moment. And then the last recommendation is to support and encourage parents to help their child to live an active life. So support and encourage parents, I've just read that, reassure parents on their child's wellbeing and ability to take part. So this can be from healthcare professionals, offer practical support like travel support workers and local and sustainable activities, help children and parents to be active together and for parents to be role models, show parents the benefits of their child being active, and link sport and activity deliverers to other family and parent support organisations. So that is the whole piece of research in 34 minutes. I've gone a little bit over, sorry guys. Hopefully that's been helpful, but yeah, even if you can't read the whole piece of research, there is a helpful guide that's broken down into 3 or 4 pages of the key information. So that would be a really good place to start, if nothing else. Brilliant.
Thank you for that, Nicola.
No worries.
That was really interesting. Some great insights that I'm sure many will go back and have a look at in their own time. Just conscious of the time of the webinar, so if you do have any questions for Nicola, I would suggest we do that in the breakout rooms at the end, so you'll have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
We'll move on to the next part of the webinar. You're now going to hear from 2 excellent PE leads about how they deliver fully inclusive activities to their pupils, and hopefully it will bring to life some of the findings and some of those recommendations within that report. So Ali, could I ask you to share your screen?
Yeah, let me share desktop.
And as I say, guys, please do follow it up, and you'll get all these slides and the recording of this webinar, so you can have another look through at a time that suits you.
Is that working okay?
You just need to get to start the presentation, but yet we can see the screen.
See the screen, you can see me, fab.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Right, well, so my name is Al. For any of you that don't know me, I work at Chailey Heritage School. So today I'm just going to really talk to you about what we do at Chailey Heritage in terms of keeping our students that have very complex physical, cognitive, medical needs as physically active as possible, because it can be quite a challenge at times, and it's something that we've taken our time to get right with, and potentially, hopefully, will help you guys if you do have to cater for any children with, you know, profound and multiple learning difficulties and physical needs. Hopefully, you can take something away from this. So the main topics that we're going to cover, we're not going to go into too much detail because I'm aware we've only got sort of 15 minutes or so. So I'm going to sort of briefly go over a lot of this, but I will like to talk, you know, as much as I can, and you can follow up with questions. So who we are, it's important to know who we are and who we cater for, what our PE and sport provision is and how it works at Chailey, how we engage in the community and with Active Sussex and how that's helped with us, some of our key good practice that we do, and some challenges that we face. It's important to talk about the challenges. It was really interesting to hear Nicola's presentation, because a lot of it was very transferable to some of the challenges that our children and parents face at Chailey Heritage School. So yeah, right, we'll get started. So just a bit of background into Chailey Heritage School. We're a non-maintained special needs school, so that makes us slightly different. We take on roughly between 90 and 100 pupils per year. That has increased over the last year. We've had quite a high demand. We've had sort of, you know, normally we have 1 or 2 per year, and then it's increased to about 6 or 7. So, you know, we are having to cater for a lot more children, a lot more complex needs. Young people are coming through the system and needing a more specific education potentially, because of our medical provision that we have with an NHS partnership. They're required to come somewhere like Chailey. We cater for children from 3 all the way up to 19. They come from 10 local authorities around the south of England. They have a real wide range of abilities. Most have cerebral palsy, but a lot will have very complex medical needs now. And as I said, we have that partnership with the NHS, and so a lot will have, I say there most need one-to-one support, but actually every single young person we have now and young adult we have has one-to-one support, if not 2-to-1 support now, one of those potentially being a nurse if they have very complex seizures. The children are split into 3 departments, so we have our primary, secondary, and then 16 plus departments. Roughly 35 students per department, split between 6 classes of roughly between 3 and 8 pupils per class, so much different from your sort of mainstream environment in terms of that. One of the reasons for that, again, is because they have that 1-to-1, if not 2-to-1 support, so you have as many TAs in the class as you do students, as well as a teacher as well, so we have to keep it very contained. So that's a brief outline of who we are and who we cater for. So in terms of physical provision and how the children at Chailey access meaningful physical activity, this is the kind of approach that we adopted. Myself and the deputy head, we kind of got together and we categorized it into 3 different almost sections, and I'm going to go through the 3 sections and hopefully they'll be helpful for you. So yeah, we wanted to make sure that physical activity was always meaningful for every single individual young person, and that was key. We found that in the past there was, you know, we had some young people that were kind of doing an activity, you know, just because it was in their timetable, for example, and what they were potentially getting out of it, we were concerned about. So we decided to create this kind of 3-strand approach. So I'm going to go through them all, and hopefully you'll understand which one and why each individual are in that kind of in that topic. So the first one we have is young children at Chailey that are cognitively typically developing, but have very, very complex physical needs or medical needs. So they understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. They know, just as any typically developing young person would, at their age range, yet their physical needs are quite complex. So they may have limited, if not any movement, maybe a basic hand movement or eye movement or whatever it might be. So for these young people, we really focus, and we're lucky enough to have engineers on site, and I work with the engineers we've created these switch activated adaptive equipment. So you may have a piece of equipment that bowls a ball, that bats a ball, that would move a ramp to the left, to the right, and release a ball. All activated through switches, and that's not just your typical hand switch. It could be an infrared switch where you turn your head and an infrared beam will activate the switch, or maybe a head or a tongue switch. It could be anything. So we're really lucky to have that. And for those young people, we particularly focus on things like the rules and the tactics and teamwork skills based around these adaptive sports, whether it's table cricket or bocce. We're focusing not so much on the the cardiovascular benefits of physical activity, because these young people, they do access that through other areas, physiotherapy, rebound, hydrotherapy. However, we really focus on, during their sports, the rules and the tactics and teamwork skills. So that's the kind of first section. The second one is almost like the mirror opposite in a way. We have children at Chailey who are physically very active. They may be able to independently walk or walk with very little assistance using a walker or anything, but really are cognitively lower developing. So they struggle with their learning ability. They would really struggle on gaining the insight into the rules and tactics and teamwork skills, and potentially they probably won't ever have those skills if they're at a PMLD learning level. So we really focus on the physicalness of that. So staying physically active, the cardiovascular, the muscular benefits of walking, biking, the physiotherapy, rebound therapy and hydrotherapy. It's not saying that any of our children, if they're in category 1, they get less rebound or physio than anyone in category 2. But if they're working in PE or sport during their sessions, they will potentially have an extra bike ride or a walking session compared to the other children in category 1 that will be working on those switch activated pieces of equipment and the rules and tactics of the games. So that's category 2, and then category 3 is kind of a middle ground, and this is what I would say is probably closest to what you would typically see in a PE lesson in a SCN school or in a mainstream environment. These are for children that I say cognitively strong. They're potentially not typically developing, so they may be at key stage 4 but learning at key stage 1 level, but they can understand basics of rules and tactics and such, and they do have physical limitations as well, but they might have gross motor skills. They might be able to grasp and release or throw at a basic level. So for these young people, we'll focus on things like the adapted sports, and we'll be developing learning skills around everything that group 1, for example, were learning, and a lesson will typically look similar to what a typical PE lesson would look like in regards to. Sorry, a helicopter's just gone over. Helicopters. What a typical PE lesson will look like. It will have a warm up, you'll have a drill session, you'll have a skill session, you'll have a game, and then you'll have a cool down session. And they'll be over the course of this school year, they'll be working on individualized targets around those areas. So they're the kind of 3 strands, and it's not like when a young person's in, like they've been sort of placed into these categories, that it's not fluid. We have children that really develop their physical skills and can move into category 3 from 1, or can move in from 2 to 1 or 2 to 3. Sorry. So it's not set. It's quite fluid. So I'm going to talk about joint working now. So the benefit, I think it's really important to talk about, and I really want to talk about the benefits of working that we've had with working with Active Sussex, and how much that's meant to our children, our students that we have at Chailey. Before I sort of joined, we didn't really have any link with the community. We're very self-sustained at Chailey. We have doctors, nurses, dentists, everything, and we rarely left the site. The children left the site really. Things like the Parallel Youth Games, just having that opportunity for, you can see in the picture Keely and Holly there, that just be able to be involved with other schools and peers around of their age. It meant so much to them, not just to them, but to their parents as well, to be able to perform in front of 300 people, meet new people, make new friends. It was absolutely fantastic. Off the back of working with Active Sussex, we've made some fantastic partners. I'm going to particularly focus on Sussex Cricket because we've had a really good relationship, and it's developed a lot over the past couple of years. So we've been working with them for a few years, but I was really keen on trying to develop some sort of competition format for that almost category 1 that I was talking about earlier, those young people that have the understanding of what they're doing and why they're doing it, yet physically just can't play. So I'll use the example of Archie, for example, on the bottom left picture. This is our table cricket switch activated device, and he's accessing that through an infrared switch. So the only movement he has is literally this in his wrist. Yet he fully understands what he's doing and why he's doing it. He knows he needs to hit that switch so that the ball will shoot up, and he's got to aim for different targets. And what I really was keen on doing was increasing the opportunities, because I'm aware that there are students with complex needs in other SEN schools around Sussex and around the country really, that have children that would maybe struggle in the typical adaptive sports, but may be able to thrive in an environment like this. So Sussex Cricket got funding from Lord Taverners to be able to run this complex needs league. And we had our first match against Woodlands Mead, which was fantastic. It was a really great competition. Woodlands Mead came to us. We had a whole day of competition. It was absolutely brilliant. We were due to have the second one, but because of the pandemic, unfortunately, we had to postpone. But it'll be really exciting to get that league up and running and have something where children with PMLD, profound and multiple learning difficulties, can compete in a appropriate environment for their needs. Okay. I'm not going to go into too much detail about a good practice that we have here, but it's something just to talk about because it really makes up the core of what Chailey is. We don't follow the national curriculum, we follow a child-centred curriculum. So what that means is every single young person has a individualised curriculum built around them, not imposed by anyone, which is nice, apart from the therapists that we have. So we have the child's curriculum may look like they may be working on communication skills, access to technology, powered mobility, their physical skills. And this comes from a big multidisciplinary team from physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech and language therapists. And that's kind of filtered down into the child aquatics curriculum and the child's rebound therapy curriculum. They all kind of come from this child-centered approach to learning. So if they're working on something, say balance in rebound therapy, that will have come from probably a physio that's been doing balance work during box group sessions, or our aquatics manager doing something to do with balancing or floating on a float during a swimming session. So they're all linked, and that we come together as a big group to work out what each young person needs and why they need it, to come up with their individualized targets. And just a quick one there, meeting the children's health and therapy needs, a big part of that comes from the NHS partnership that we have, the fact that we have speech and language therapists and occupational therapists and physiotherapists all on site that are able to come and deliver sessions and have input into the child's learning and curriculum needs on a daily basis, which we're so lucky for. Okay, and then finally, I'm just going to talk about some of the challenges that we face in terms of access for our children and attitudes. I don't want to focus too much on this because it's not the nicest thing, but it's worth just talking about because some of it does overlap actually with the presentation earlier in terms of what Nicola her findings found as well. So it's interesting. So we got some practical issues, things like equipment. Again, that came up from the study that Nicola did with Activity Alliance. Practical issues in terms of equipment, how expensive it is, the cost of equipment, things like adapted bikes and trikes and things. I mean, and the children are constantly growing. They cost an absolute fortune, and that's a challenge that we do face. We're lucky enough, because we're a non-maintained special needs school, we're a charity with charitable status, so we can fundraise for things, but they do cost a lot of money. Physical limitations. So this is literally like some of the young people's movement. If they like the picture of Archie, if that's all he has in his movement, it doesn't make it impossible, but it makes it challenging to be able to engage him in some sort of meaningful sport and activity. I don't want to put that as a barrier because it's certainly not a barrier, but I'll raise it as a challenge that we do face. Transport, again, that was another one that came up in Nicola's findings, and it's something that we face. We can only really take maximum of 5 children on a bus, sometimes only 3 if they have 3 staff with them and oxygen and a nurse with them and things like that. It becomes a real problem to try and get them off site and into a different sporting environment, so that they can interact with other children their age. So it is a barrier and it's a challenge that we face. I put down NGBs and governing bodies. I don't want to talk about that too much because it's not a barrier, it's not a challenge, but it's sometimes things like adaptive equipment sometimes isn't quite adaptive enough for children with PMLD, for very limited movement. It's a very tricky one, and it's something that I'd love to work with more NGBs to be able to find out a way to make their sport, for example, more appropriate for people that have really complex needs, and that's something that I'd love to work with. There's probably some NGBs within the network that we can talk about. I can talk to about, which would be fantastic. And then attitudes. Go on to attitudes. So again, this comes down to sort of society's expectations as well. Again, I'm going back to Nicola's presentation. It's one of her findings. Society's expectations of what a disabled athlete is, and the majority that you see in the media and things is it doesn't really necessarily relate to people with PMLD, and and that is a challenge maybe for the sort of motivation of our young people if they don't see role models out there and things like that. So it's a challenge, and it's something that hopefully will develop over time once more sport becomes accessible for children with complex needs. The preconception as well is similar to expectations, but it's almost the idea of, if someone can't move, how can they actively be involved in sport? And that's something that comes up. It's just, well, if they can't move, they just can't. They can't do it, and that's not necessarily the case. You can experiment with different pieces of equipment and things. But yeah, that's something that we could do. And then finally, parental engagement issues. This is definitely quite relatable, again, to Nicola's study. Again, the schedule, one of the biggest things is schedule's too big. Some of these children, their days is just completely packed out with appointments, with clinics, as well as lessons that, the teachers put on for their learning. So sometimes sport and physical activity can get pushed to the sidelines, and parents have a lot going on. For a parent that is looking after a child with, PMLD and very complex needs, it's a 24-hour job. And sometimes things like sport. Another thing that came up as well was, again, the scared of getting safety concerns around children with PMLD. If someone's attached to oxygen, if someone has tracheostomies, whatever it may be, parents are very concerned. They have this preconception maybe that sport is rough and tumble and that their child just won't be able to do any form of sport. Whereas if they, there is a way around that, and it's a challenge we face, but something that with more education to the parents and getting them to come in and see, it's changing, which is fantastic. I don't want to finish on a negative, like a challenge finish on a sort of something that's been relatively negative. So I am proud. I'm certainly proud of what we do at Chailey. It's fantastic that we have. I'm realised we're very lucky in terms of what we have at Chailey in regards that we can fundraise for pieces of equipment for the children. We have things like mechanics on site. We have input from professional physiotherapists and every doctors, whatever it may be. So it's fantastic that we've got this service here, and that we can really sort of hone in on what the children need in terms of their individual targets. We definitely haven't got all the answers. I'm not saying that we have all the answers to PMLD sport whatsoever. And potentially what could be fantastic out of this is whether we could share, a lot of different schools around Sussex, share good practice, and work together for the future. Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, Al. That was really great. Really interesting to hear about how you've approached it there, and obviously the challenges, a lot of them correlated with Nicola's report, but really good to hear that sort of child-centred approach that you do take. I'm conscious of time. We are going to run a little bit over today, guys, but the recording will be available and you can carry on your conversations or questions with Al at the end. Katie, could you get ready to share your screen?
Yes.
So I'm just going to pass over to Katie, who works at Cradle Hill Primary School. I'll let her do her introduction. But again, another excellent PE lead that's really passionate and done some fantastic work to improve the provision for SEND pupils. Let's just see if we
Can you see? Oh no, it's might be me and my computer again.
No problem.
Sorry to keep you all.
No problem at all. I think everyone's getting used to having IT issues with the current situation. By the end of this, everyone's going to be well advanced with any Teams calls or virtual things like this. So. How are you getting on, Katie? In the meantime, guys, as I say, these presentation slides will be available, and if you don't have time to go and carry on discussions in the breakout rooms, Katie, Nicola and Alice, Al's contact details will be available. So if you did want to drop them an email and perhaps set up a phone call to discuss it in more detail, I would certainly suggest doing that.
I can share my screen, Katie, if you'd like.
Have you got it shared now? Can you see it?
Yeah.
We can indeed. We're good to go.
Amazing.
So I'll pass over to Katie and off you go.
I'm Katie. I'm from Cradle Hill in Seaford. We are a mainstream primary school. We are 3-4 entry, so we have 3 classes from reception up to year 4 at the moment. And it's progressively going from year 5 to year 6. And I just want to share with you some of the things that we do at school. So developing confidence from a young age. So at Cradle Hill, we are very, very lucky for space. We have a big AstroTurf as well as some fields. We have 2 playgrounds, a Key Stage 1 playground and a Key Stage 2 playground. We also have Year 1 areas and a reception area too, which we put in the reception and Year 1 areas. We provide a lot of opportunity for all children to develop their gross motor skills. This could be through going on scooters, climbing crates, building, because we know as staff that developing children's gross motor skills develops their fine motor skills later on. But we're very lucky for space, and we use this to our advantage as well. For our SEND children, each morning they have sensory circuits, and this is to give them the opportunity to prepare for their day and to get out any tension that they have. And since we've been doing the sensory circuits, the children have been more focused in class, and it's really benefited their learning. We also provide daily nurture for our SEND pupils, and this focuses on social and emotional and physical well-being. So they have a nurture room, but they're also going outside a lot, and they're developing all their gross and fine motor skills as well as their social skills as well. As I said, I'm a class teacher too, so I just wanted to share a couple of my PE lessons of children that have really succeeded in my class that have SEND barriers. So last year I was teaching Year 1, and I had a lovely young girl called Ellie, and she had cerebral palsy. And we built up such an amazing positive relationship that she was able to challenge herself in my PE lessons, as well as knowing that I was there to support her as well. So one activity that we had lots of benches, lots of big equipment, and she challenged herself to walk across the benches, climbing over, climbing under. And when she needed that support, she came and asked me. But I also, like Nicola's presentation, gave her that independence. I was able to keep a close eye on her, as well as the rest of my class, but also give her that independence to challenge herself. And through doing that, she has just built up so much confidence. And it's so lovely to see that when a positive impact helps a child succeed, whether they have special educational needs or don't at all. Last year also, I had a boy with Down syndrome, and he was the best at throwing and catching. He was just incredible. But he had an INA, but we also made sure that his INA stepped away and gave him that chance for independence, because it's really important that all children have that opportunity to be independent, whether they do have special educational needs or they don't. And he just was amazing. So in our school, everyone has an inclusive attitude, and that is the pupils as well as staff. As I said, last year I had a few needs in my class, and all of my class was so supportive of Ellie and Orson. We always celebrated their achievements as well as anyone else's achievements. So it's really embedded at our school that everyone has an inclusive attitude. So engaging and listening to all children, we have regular pupil voice. We are really connected to Wave Leisure. They come in and run our after school clubs, but they also come in twice a week to run lunch time clubs for us. I meet regularly with Wave Leisure once every term to discuss activities that they're putting on within our lunchtime clubs, but also our after school clubs as well. And this enables us to cater for all the children within our school. And we celebrate all children's successes. We get feedback from the student council, and the student council is made up of all different types of children. We also provide a daily lunchtime clubs for pupils that might need extra support, and they are given a specific outside area to use. This may be children that need extra help socialising or might need more physical help, but we also provide a lunch club. One thing that I'm really proud of that I've embedded at Cradle Hill is our swimming. In the summer term, we have intensive swimming lessons for year 3 to year 6. So each year group has 1 week's intensive swimming lessons, and they have half an hour swimming every single day for a week. The progression that we have seen in regards to all children's swimming levels has increased so much, because they've been having their lessons every single day. Also, no child has an excuse to forget their swimming kit, because it's always the next day. Teachers also know that learning is going to be affected for 1 week, and the levels that children are progressing through has just been brilliant. So anyone that's struggling with swimming, I would definitely recommend, if your local pool can provide intensive blocks for you, it's fantastic. Once the children reach year 5, we then look at the levels and we target the children who might need extra support with swimming. And these might be children who have SEND, or other children who might just not have opportunities to go swimming regularly with their parents. So those children are then given an extra week in a smaller group. So the groups might be about 10 children, 10, 15 children, and they will have an hour swimming every single day. And as I say, our swimming progression has really developed because of this. And also I've got a really supportive staff at school, and they are really supportive about making sure that we have an active learning approach, but we also provide lots of opportunities for active brain breaks, because we know that if children have got lots of physical opportunity within the school day, their learning is going to be far greater. So one thing I know that schools struggle with is getting your staff on board. I've been a PE lead for 5 years now, 5-6 years, and getting your staff on board can be very tricky. But these are some ideas of how we promote physical activity for staff. So we set an events dates calendar early in the school year, and we have them in the calendar, so teachers have no excuse not to know that they're in there. I'm a bit of a nagger, so the teachers are constantly getting reminders through emails or in staff meetings that an event is coming up, so they're constantly reminded. We ask the teachers a lot for advice about which children they think would be really good for an event that we're doing outside of school, but we get the teachers really on board. It's a whole school approach, so our SLT are really supportive of our PE within our school, and I think that really, really helps. As I say, we're always listening to staff, and I'm very lucky. The PE team has grown, so there is myself and 2 other PE coordinators, and we also have 1 TA that also regularly supports us. And because we have a team, we're able to implement more. And I would definitely recommend, if you're a school that just has 1 PE lead, to maybe look at seeing if you can get a team, because PE is just so important. And I always believe that it's really important to say thank you and show your appreciation for the staff's hard work. And always just saying thank you or please, even if you are being a nag and reminding them all the time through emails, it's really important to say thank you. So on sports day for every year, I fill the staff room with treats for the staff just to say thank you. So chocolate, and it's not the healthiest, but it helps the staff stay on board. Engaging parents, so we have a termly newsletter, we put reminders on the app, we encourage, all staff encourage physical activity within school. We also, because we have lots of club links, and through having our after school clubs also through Wave Leisure, we're able to open up our free spaces to pupil premium children and give them the opportunity to attend the clubs for free if there's spaces within the clubs, after school clubs. And building this relationship with the clubs has taken a long time, but it's really important to have those relationships. So just a little bit more of an insight to our school. So every half term, we run an intra-school competition for all of Key Stage 2. So we will do football. So each class will take part in intra-school competition for football. We have Winter Sports Day, which is lots of fun. So we do silly things like welly throwing and penalty shootouts, and lots of just different fun activities that are just a little bit bonkers and a little bit silly, but just promote physical activity. And the children love these half-termly activities, intra-school games, but also the teachers are really on board now, and don't really need any help or advice from us when we're giving them specific times or dates. We have a health week, which goes alongside sports day, and we will get local clubs in to run free lessons for our Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 classes. We'll also get involved with the kitchen, and they will also run cooking sessions for us. One activity that we got in this year and last year was Scoop Fit, and all of our children really loved those activities. We've also in the past run Bike at Breakfast. Now, my first Bike at Breakfast about 4 years ago had 4 families turn up. Last year when we ran them, I had 60 people turn up to a Bike at Breakfast. So parents and the children had cycled or scooted to school. That has grown, and that has just taken time. Unfortunately, this year we haven't been able to implement that, but hopefully next year that will be able to happen. I keep an eye on which children are going to after school clubs and events termly, so we can then get more children involved. And as I said, communication with external clubs is really, really, really important. And we have been able to build up more of a relationship with these clubs too. They also come and run free PE lessons for us, which has been, yeah, it's really important. But as Al said earlier, there is always next steps and there's always time to reflect. And I think as a teacher, we're always good at looking at next steps and reflections. And I know that I had a meeting with my other PE coordinators yesterday, and we were already looking at reflections from this year to make things better for next year. So things are never perfect, but there's always progression for more. And that's it.
Brilliant, that's great. Thank you, Katie. That was really, really good. Guys, what we're going to do is if you've got any questions, I would suggest doing that in the breakout rooms, because I am conscious we have run over. One thing we will share is after this, obviously with COVID-19, there's been a severe impact for schools. They're currently struggling trying to plan and cater for having social distancing for reception and year 1 pupils. However, AFP have just released some guidance around the health and safety to support that, and Youth Sport Trust have also produced a document to help with that, so we will share that with the group after this presentation. Jem, I'll pass back over to you if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Can you hear me okay? So thank you for the presentations, Nicola, Al and Katie. They were fantastic. I appreciate that we have gone over a bit. However, I think it was really beneficial to hear all those examples. We would now like to offer a chance for you to ask questions to the 3 presenters. And we feel the best way to do that is to split you into groups. So hopefully you can see my screen, and there is some instructions on how to move yourself into one of the specific groups. So my colleague Nick and Andy and David, who will also work in the CYP team at Active Sussex, will be hosting the rooms, and the 3 presenters will move into their respective rooms as well. So all you need to do is on the left-hand side, you should be able to see the list of channels, whether you're on a laptop or on a tablet. And all you need to then do is click on the room that you would like to go into. So either the CYP Insight, Mainstream Schools or Send Schools. And then once you've clicked on that, it should come up with the posting stream, and you should then be able to press Join Now. If you wish to then come back into the main room and then go into another room, all you have to do is click on the little triangle, or if you're on a tablet, which I'll flick to that, you will actually need to end the call and then go back into the group. So hopefully that that all works for people. There's no obligation for you to stay on and to join those groups, but I just think it hopefully gives people an opportunity to do so. While those rooms are being set up though, if you want to grab yourself a drink or a coffee or stretch your legs, then please do. Like I said, the presenters will move into those rooms, and then you can obviously have your individual conversations and discussions, which will also be recorded. So just to finish off, before you move into those rooms, thanks once again to our presenters. We've got some links that we will obviously send out, and we will also hopefully send the recording, and we will also send some additional links to things like the AFP delivery, PE delivery that Nick just mentioned, and also the YST provision and resources that they've created. So just to say a big thank you again, and we hope that you will join future webinars. We're looking at maybe holding 2 more, one in June and one in July. And then hopefully towards the end of the year, we might be back to a face-to-face conference. So if you're not already signed up, do make sure you're signed up to the Disability and Inclusion e-news, which joins you to the Disability Sport Network. But thank